It's me. I'm back with another mediocre video. I know. Hold your applause. But anyway, welcome back to another True Crime Time with Junebug. That's me. And today, I didn't really know what I was getting myself into when I started the research for this. So, just to warn you, I definitely will not have all the facts and the information. You could go find the rest yourself, because I don't want to just sit here and read verbatim each article I see. That's not the point of these videos. But today we are going to talk about Kelly. You're probably like, that's it, just Kelly? Yes. But she's also known as, or was formerly known as, the El Dorado Jane Doe. Now this takes place on July 10th of 1991. And I always say the age of the victims in case anything with children bothers you, but she was 23. So still way too young for what happened to her, but not a child, because I know some things with children can really bother people. And this obviously takes place in El Dorado, which is in Arkansas in the US. I really thought El Dorado was in Texas. It's not. Now, this is a solved case. It took a while. Let's leave it at that. I want to note, as I started at the beginning, this may get a bit confusing. And I'm kind of telling it backwards. Like it's with you. I'm jumping between timelines. I think you know what I'm trying to say. I'm only calling her Kelly, by the way, due to like her last name. It's like withheld for the family's privacy. I think I saw it on Find a Grave. I don't know if that's actually her real last name or if it was like, oops, this wasn't supposed to be visible. So I didn't want to throw it in there in case it was an accident. Now we'll start with the beginning. So Kelly was born in 1968 to her mom, Brenda. Again, don't know the last name. It could have been different. And I don't know if that's truly her mom's name. It seems to be. I have no clue about her dad. I don't know if she ever met her biological father, but she was born in Virginia. And I didn't see much on her childhood until later. So it turns out like her very early, her childhood seemed to be pretty normal. Like both her mom and dad, although I think dad wasn't like biological dad, but it was like the father figure in the home. It was pretty normal. They both worked, they had decent jobs, just pretty standard, I'm guessing middle class stuff. Things started to really take a turn when Kelly's mom, Brenda, they divorced. Her and her husband divorced from each other, and then Brenda remarried just a few months later. And this new husband, he was very abusive, very abusive to like everyone, Brenda included, I believe. With the abuse turned into drug use with Brenda, and then since the mom wasn't working anymore, it involved theft became involved. She would use her daughters because I don't quite know if Kelly's younger sister is her full sister or if it's a half sister, but she did have a younger sister. And Brenda would just start using her daughters to try to make money. I believe it was Kelly, not the sister, who she entered into like a bikini contest, or it was like a hot body contest when she was under 16, again, to make some money. So just once that second husband or the remarried man, don't entirely know if that is her official second marriage or if she's had more, just things started to go really downhill, unfortunately, for Kelly and her upbringing. There's a lot more you could find on it. We would be here a lot longer if I went into like every detail I saw about kind of how shitty her mom and her upbringing were, and that guy that abused them. But then I also saw, I don't know if it's true, the second husband passed away or if it was the first husband. I don't know which husband of Brenda's passed away. One of them did. I couldn't like find the details of which one it necessarily was. Because it said the second husband, but then I also saw sources that said the second husband was the one who abused them. So maybe it's both. But anyway, dealing with all that stuff, and then either Brenda divorced the second husband or he passed away, depending on the article you look at. She would move in, like with the girls, to her parents' house. And from what I saw, Brenda never like worked again. Apparently she came from like a, not affluent, but like a well-off family, and she just kind of expected other people to like pay for things or take care of her. That's kind of why she got married so fast. Theories are that she just expected men to like pay for things and be the provider just because. And so instead of, which led to her thieving when she didn't have a man, and it's just, things were rough. Just to put it in the slightest. Sorry about the childhood tangent, but it is like, it's what points Kelly towards what happens. But the childhood rough, they moved around a lot from what I saw, because in 1986, when Kelly's 18, so we're jumping ahead. I don't know the exact timelines for the just dealing with the mother, but they moved to Little Rock, Arkansas. Now they're bouncing around a lot. It doesn't necessarily, like, this isn't necessarily impertinent to like keep in your mind, but it's just Kelly moved around a lot. Like 3 years later in 1989, she and her sister, Kelly and her sister, would move to Florida. And then just Kelly would move back to Virginia in 1990. She would move to Texas in 1991. And then later in 1991, Kelly would move to El Dorado, Arkansas, which, as we know, is her last location, unfortunately. So Kelly was bouncing everywhere. Now, during this time of about 16 to 23, when things were like really bad with her mom and she was entering young adulthood, Kelly would become an identity thief to help make ends meet and to like help / deal with her mom, because her mom would, from what I saw, lie about Kelly's age to like I said, enter in like the bikini contest. Like everything she did was kind of to try to quote unquote help her mom. So just not a great scenario, but she did turn to identity theft. Now the name Cheryl Ann Wick was the main like ID she stole. Now she used this so she could say she was 18 to work at a nightclub / bar. She was like a stripper / dancer. Some of the other known names she had, which Cheryl Ann Wick was like the most prominent one, but some other names she would use were Mercedes. That one comes up a lot because that's how her friends knew her. She would go by Kelly Lee Carr, like C-A-R-R. She would also go by Kelly Carr with K-A-R-R. She would go by Shannon Wiley, also Cheryl Kaufman, and Sharon Wiley. Like all different variations of spelling. And again, none of these are her real name, minus the Kelly part. But none of those were her actual last names. It was also said due to picking up the habit from her mother, from what I saw, she struggled with a cocaine addiction. And she would try to get help. I believe she went to rehab. I don't know if 100% worked, but I know I saw that she struggled with cocaine addiction and she couldn't live with her mom at some point because she knew there was just cocaine there. She's like, I can't do it. I can't live there. Cocaine's there. I have a problem. It's just not good for me. Nor is her mother, but that's besides the point. Also, just if this case brings to mind anything, like if you remember it, you're probably realizing like, wait, I thought she did this or was this. Well, there are many different stories, like life stories about Kelly told by others and she told to others, and they told, everything was just by word of mouth, and everything was, depending on who you asked, you got kind of a different story about Kelly, about like where she came from. Such as like her probably being a sex worker was one of the things that was talked about. She had been arrested a few times, was one of them. She maybe had 1 or 2 kids. She was maybe involved in a bank robbery on the East Coast. Also, supposedly, her dad was in the mafia, like her biological father. Or she was maybe in the witness protection program. These were all things said by Kelly or told by others about Kelly, like that they learned from her. It probably dealt with her being an identity thief, just to kind of throw people off the trail or to remain elusive. But some of the truth, I guess, when it comes to these was she probably was a sex worker at some point because she was arrested for prostitution in Dallas at least 4 times from what I saw between December 31st of 1990 and May of 1991. Now, at least 3 of these times, she was arrested as Cheryl Ann Wick. She was arrested for prostitution, as I mentioned. There was public lewdness I saw, and writing bad checks, which goes back to her identity thief ways. I really have no idea about the kids, if that is true or not, if she had them. I'm gonna say most likely false, but I really don't know. I don't know if anyone truly knows from what I saw. I'm sure someone does, but it's not me, so don't ask. And police later were not able to connect her to a bank robbery on the East Coast, so that also was probably false. They also couldn't find any information about a mafia boss dad that they couldn't find, and they also didn't see anything that would connect her to like the witness protection program. So if you're wondering if you've heard about this case and you heard some of the things I mentioned, this is kind of like the truths they discovered throughout solving this case and finally learning who she is. So some things are still like iffy, but these are kind of what she was going through in her early adult life. Sorry, I know this is confusing. I said it'd be confusing and it's a bit backwards. You're probably thinking, girl, you haven't mentioned the crime at all. And you're right. Patience. Or just leave the video. That's okay too. I understand. Now, due to all of these conflicting things, like just the things making this video confusing, and the fact she's an identity thief, it made her murder very hard to solve. Because as I saw in an article, it's not a who done it, it's a who is it? And I'll get to that specifics in a moment. So, her murder. To start, we need to mention her ex-boyfriend. She started dating him in Dallas, from what I could tell, and his name was James McAlpin. I don't really know anything about him, and I don't really care, since he's an asshole. Now, when the two were dating, Kelly would have to go to the ER numerous times due to injuries she received from him. So already he's not great. It was also thought that James could have been her pimp. I don't 100% know, but it's thought he could have been her pimp. Or maybe he was just a straight asshole. Either way, he's an asshole. Now, at some point, she had enough of this abuse, which good for her, and she left him. And she moved in with her friend. Now, this is in Arkansas, El Dorado, Arkansas, from what I can tell from the timeline. Now, James would still like call and try to contact her, and most of the time it was just basically to threaten her. Like, he wanted to be together, I guess, so he could just beat her. Seemed to be the gist of it. He just wanted control. Now, he eventually wore her down, unfortunately, because she agreed to meet with him at the Whitehall Motel. Now, I tried looking up this hotel. Turns out it's no longer in business, which, given the circumstances, I can understand. But James promised to like give her money if he met with her. I don't know if it's because if it goes back to him maybe being her pimp and he's like, oh yeah, here's your back pay or something. Or there was another source that said she wanted the money for her kid or kids for like a birthday present or a Christmas present. I don't entirely know, like, what. I doubt he was just gonna say, come over, I'll give you some money. Maybe he did, I don't know, because it seems like he had no intention to actually give her money. But they met up on July 10th of 1991. So at the motel, the Whitehall Motel, a man named Roy Menon would witness the pair verbally fighting, which, are we surprised it came to that? No. Now, it said that Roy, lived there, quote unquote. This motel was pretty run down. A lot of people kind of just lived there. It wasn't a great area, just to put it that way. But he would go knock on the door where James was staying, and he wanted some cassette tapes back, I guess. So that would interrupt the fight. And Kelly, when Roy came to the door asking for his cassette tapes, she tried leaving. She wanted to leave, and she said, you talk to him, he's bonkers. James would unfortunately hit her and then drag her back into the motel room and lock the door, leaving Roy kind of what? So Roy would continue to hear them fighting. It may have gotten physical between the two. I'm not entirely sure, but he could definitely hear yelling. But then unfortunately, Roy heard a gunshot shortly after. And then he saw James fleeing from the scene. It was said that her friend Andrea, the one who she moved in with after breaking it off with James, she was actually walking by the motel when she heard the gunshot go off. So I don't know if she was walking by, just to go for a walk, or if she was just worried about her friend, which, in retrospect, she had every right to be, because Andrea would run to the motel and find Kelly dead on the floor. Now, I don't know the exact timeline with what's next, who called the police, but the police were called and James was arrested shortly after. I don't know if it was Andrea or Roy who called or someone else, but the police were called. Now, James, he denied the killing. He said it was a suicide. Okay. He still denies it to this day, by the way. He still insists it was a suicide. Whatever, James. Whatever you say. He also refused to tell them who she was or anything about her, which normally that'd be okay, whatever, we'll look at her ID and just ask her roommate who is here. Now, the reason it was more annoying, I guess you could say, that James wouldn't say anything was because the ID found on Kelly was for Cheryl Ann Wick. And her friend Andrea was saying she knew her as Mercedes, not Cheryl. So there's already conflicting information. Now, I don't know if the police didn't believe Andrea or if they thought Mercedes was maybe just a nickname, because they found the parents of Cheryl Ann Wick, called them up, and said, "I'm so sorry, your daughter's been murdered." And obviously, this devastated them until they got a call from their actual daughter, Cheryl, saying she was fine. She also mentioned she had never met Kelly/Mercedes, but she thinks her stuff was probably stolen from her when she worked as a dancer. Apparently, Cheryl did know her IDs and stuff were stolen a while ago from her purse, and it was at the time, like I said, she was a dancer, and she assumes this is when Kelly/Mercedes got a hold of her stuff. I also want to note the real Cheryl lived in Minnesota, so not close. So with that dead end, and they're like, okay, so who is this lady? So there's that dead end. The friend doesn't really know who she is. James is still refusing to talk. And all this conflicting information we talked about earlier in the video about how she's maybe got a dad in the mafia. Maybe she's in the witness protection program. She might have kids. There's all this conflicting information. They just were like, who is she? Now, the search for her true identity would take nearly 31 years. That's a while. So police would try to go through all the possible leads they could, but everything kept coming back up empty, I guess is the word for it. And which, again, dealing with the stuff we talked about at the beginning, that's kind of why I wanted to mention it first, because there was a lot of stuff that could be like pulling the police in all sorts of directions. Now, I do want to note, which kind of annoyed the heck out of me, but James, he was charged with her murder. Like, he went to prison, but he was only given 15 years. That seems quite low, in my personal opinion. I don't know if it's because they didn't know who she was. Like, they didn't have family at the trial. Like, I personally feel like 15 is not enough. He also would never cooperate. I don't think he's ever given information. Well, he did give some information. I think he did mention her name was Kelly at some points, like years into a sentence, in exchange for $4,000. That's what he wanted. I don't think they gave him the money. But he mentioned some other things about her past, but James has been deemed as very unreliable. So they took everything he said with large grains of salt. Speaking of James, I believe he's out now. Just living his life. I think I found his LinkedIn profile page, which is just crazy. I don't like that. That gives me wrong vibes. It's bad vibes. I don't like him. Maybe y'all are cool with that. He did a crime and he served the time, but I feel like that time was not long enough. Kelly will never get to have a LinkedIn page, to put it lightly. I don't know much else about him, and I don't care. That may seem mean, but you know, he killed someone. Although he says to this day he did not do it. Now, away from James. Back to Kelly. So many never gave up on her case, which I thought it was sweet how many people always had Kelly in the back of their minds. It could be because it's such a unique situation. And two of the most known people for not giving up on her were Captain Kathy Phillips and Yolanda McCleary, which both ladies, which I thought was kind of cool. I believe they worked into retirement. Like, they retired, but then they still worked and thought about this case in particular. Now, McCleary actually worked with Kelly's DNA that they had to help finally find her family and later identity in 2022, which is 3 decades later. And I will link I call it the McCleary article, quote unquote. It's a website I read. Yolanda wrote like a letter as if she were Kelly to kind of explain how things happened. So if you want to read that, there's also another case on there. There's like 2 pages on this website, 3 if you count the homepage. So I was like, I'll just list it. Now, it was said, because if you're wondering, what about her sister or her mom, Brenda? I don't know what happened to her sister. I'm sorry. But I did see that Brenda, she never seemed concerned. She never saw Kelly again. She never went looking for her, didn't seem to care. Turns out Brenda didn't actually talk to any of her family anymore towards the end of her life, because she would move in with her sister, I believe, and steal from her. And obviously when her sister got mad, kicked her out, she just stopped talking to the family from what I saw. And she would pass away in 2008. But with Kelly's identity coming out in 2022, the family, once they were contacted, chose for her just to be Kelly for privacy concerns. Now, again, sorry, this case is a bit confusing, but this is kind of where it ends. There is more info about her past out there, which is why I'll link that article below that I found kind of interesting. And there are some people who are still skeptical if this is her actual family, or why are they so secretive with the last name, which I could sort of understand wanting the privacy. But some people are again, this is Reddit, so this could be 100% wrong, but some people were saying that these relatives never heard of her, didn't know who she was, and then later was oh no, she is our relative. Again, this could be totally wrong, but from what I've seen online, there are some people who are a bit skeptical about if they truly found her identity and real family. I personally think they did. They worked with DNA. But no one's asking me. That is it. I'm sorry this is long. It's confusing. It's a bit told backwards and in a circle. But I found this case and I was like, that seems interesting. And when I started diving more into it, I'm like, oh, this is a lot. This is a bit confusing. But I'm stubborn and I push through and we get mediocre results from it. So you're welcome. Do more research if you truly want to know more. But thank you for sitting through this if you truly did. And I'm really hoping the next case I have written down that interested me isn't confusing. Confusing to me at least. But I'll see you next time. Bye.